Jennifer Eason here. Thank you for joining me again, and I appreciate your comments from my last vlog. Today I want to talk about Brooke Shields. If you remember her, I do. She was part of my generation, Gen X, and I grew up seeing her in a lot of magazines and movies. She was very influential to my generation, and this interview that I saw recently, she talked about her iconic Calvin Klein ad, the one where she was contorted and she had her legs wide open and she's saying nothing comes between her and her Calvins. Now, Brooke Shields, as an adult woman, is saying that at the time she did not understand the controversy of that ad. It did cause a lot of scandal because she was very young. And if you know her body of art in terms of what she's done, she was in a movie called Pretty Baby, and she played a child prostitute. That it was a very shocking thing, and a lot of people criticized her mother, and why could she, allow this? She was also in a movie that I think influenced a lot of Romeo and Juliet type of love in teenagers, and it was called Endless Love. So, not to get off into a discussion of those movies, we can agree that Brooke Shields probably grew up a lot faster than the normal child. And that would include people like even Drew Barrymore. We remember seeing pictures of her hanging out in Studio 54, throwing back cocktails. Not a good thing for a child. So, we can bring many, many examples of stage parents, and it's not just isolated to mothers. We've seen stage fathers out on the football, baseball fields, and they're doing the most. And some would say that these children are being used by the parent to live out a fantasy. What do you think? Do you think that's something that happens? The parent is really living vicariously through the child? But I wonder, and this is not to bring victim shaming, because I do believe child stars, they're victims of this fame and fortune quest. They get the carrot dangled in front of their faces. We've seen interviews where they talk about enjoying the perks of fame, but a child being so young, you wonder, do they really understand the long-term aspects of this? Once you listen to some of their stories and they tell you what they were going through at the time, it wasn't pleasant, but they had to learn to lie. And that's the thing about children that grow up too fast in show business. They are jaded for the most part. They're actually let in on the secret of the illusions that are cast, of the lies, right? It's like a child who you would think is normal, who grows up at a normal rate. They still believe in things like Santa Claus, whereas a child who is in show business might have a scene where they're sitting on the lap of Santa, and they may have seen Santa downstairs smoking and cursing, and we can't imagine what else. So they are let behind, as they say, the fifth wall. Isn't it called the fifth wall? And they see that things are scripted. They're not as we would think. And I believe that has to be really hard for a child to be jaded and let in on this stuff so young. A lot of us, we were able to learn these things a little later. I have some notes, so please forgive me for referring to them. So I just bring up Brooke Shields in this ad, this Calvin Klein ad. Brooke is saying, again, she didn't understand the big deal because it was really criticized heavily by parent groups and religious groups because of the sexual innuendo. And some of these tropes of the Lolita, the young girl who understands her attraction that men would start to look at her in a sexual way. And I don't know the whole psychology behind that Lolita type of thing, because at some point with the children that are in show business, they begin to understand in their limited way about the business of show business. Now, the things that happen to them, they're not emotionally mature enough to handle. So they are absolutely victims in this game of fame. But I was wondering, do you think, give me your opinion, do you think the children at some point maybe become partners and collaborators with their parent because they want to please the parent? And a lot of the children do enjoy the fame and the fortune, right? So some of it has to be very confusing. And I was just wondering, when it comes to Brooke. Now, this is something I was observing with Brooke Shields. I had never seen her in this particular light. It was as if Brooke was not being honest. I can't explain it. Like she was, fiending this, I didn't know, I didn't understand. Well, maybe at the time, but I think now she would be able to understand why that ad was a big deal, Brooke. And I don't know, I was just seeing something and discerning something. As we are now discerning so much, we realize we've been lied to. Everything's been a lie. We have to hone and sharpen our discernment skills. But I picked up on some other things about her. I'll talk about it another time, possibly, but it was just something else just was so striking about watching her. But all in all, I'm just saying that I was picking up on Brooke wasn't being honest about her understanding of what that ad might have represented in culture.
Which is a rhetorical question.
You want to know what comes between me and my Calvins? Nothing.
I was naive. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think it had to do with underwear. I didn't think it was sexual in nature. I would say about my sister, nobody can come between me and my sister. What was shocking to me was to be berated by, oh, you knew this was happening. This is what you thought. You were thinking these thoughts. I was a kid. And where I was naive. I was a very protected, sequestered, kind of young woman in a bubble that my mom was just paroling the outside of.
So, that's something that we can debate. Again, not victim shaming at all. But some children, again, grow up really fast. Now, I was really sheltered. I didn't understand a lot. I had a cousin who, she knew about a lot of things. She would tell me things and I'm still like, what? So my parents were actually they were a little on the extreme of sheltering me. But when I would go to visit my father and my stepmother, they were a little more lenient. Like I was allowed to watch movies that I wasn't allowed to watch when I was with my mom. But I had a little friend, my dad and my stepmom, they lived in Virginia Highlands, which is the inner city of Atlanta, a really neat area. And I had a friend that when I would come and visit, I would play with her. And she was French Canadian and she was being raised by a single mom. Her parents were divorced as well. So we had that in common and we would have sleepovers. I loved having sleepovers where I would go to her home and her mom was this bohemian type French woman. And I remember this breakfast, the little details. I remember this breakfast she would make and she would take the bread and cut a hole out and fry the egg in butter and put the bread on top so the yolk is poking through the hole. Have you ever had this? But I didn't know if it was like a French Canadian thing. And, she would just, fry it with the butter. Yum. And when I would hang out with this friend, we would go to Lenox Mall. Lenox went through like such a big change. It was like this outdoor type of setting type of mall, and then it was enclosed and it became this luxury mall. I'm not sure what it's like now. I hear it's pretty ghetto. But anyway, we would go and the teeny bopper type of stores, she was allowed to just shop and get anything she wanted. I couldn't do things like that. My mother bought all my clothes and she determined what I wore, and it was always very age appropriate. I looked like a kid that was off to some British boarding school, always wearing like plaid and things like that, plaid jumpers and, you know, the tights. So this girl was able to get all this sexy stuff, this, I guess, Lolita type of clothing, and I was just mesmerized, like, wow, she does all these cool things. She was allowed to go to concerts. She would go to see Styx and all these rock concerts, but she was very mature and she understood her attractiveness to men. That's the thing. So I'm not sure how she learned all of this, but she knew that she had a sexual attraction and men looked at her, older men. So older men didn't look at me. Thank goodness. I was just like this board straight up and down. She had like, you know, curves and she accentuated these things with her clothing. But all that to say that I wonder about this whole aspect of children in show business. What are we going to do? I've asked this question before. I understand children, they gravitate towards the arts, music, theater, and I am not saying that children shouldn't express themselves artistically, but it's the aspect of the business and the people that prey on the children and also the parents that don't have the child's best interest. We have this machine that doesn't protect the children. The parents can take advantage. Everybody can take advantage of that child. And by the time the child becomes an adult and nobody really sees them as this cute commodity anymore, they go through a lot. And as they were climbing the fame ladder, they were traumatized as well. So tell me what you think about this whole aspect of Brooke Shields and her iconic Calvin Klein ad. And what do you think about children that are very mature, very worldly? They understand the ins and outs in terms of the illusion to a degree. Do you think that at a certain point they become a collaborator, a partner, or do you think it is like they are similar to prisoners in a sense? They're victims for sure. But what are your ideas for solutions and anything you want to share? I appreciate it. I love your comments, and please like and subscribe and share, and I will see you soon, okay? Bye.